Hello there. Today I just have two questions. What on earth did I just read? And where on earth has Jorge Luis Borges been all my life? I had no background knowledge whatsoever with regard to this amazing writer, and I sort of just stumbled upon his works. Someone on Instagram may have recommended it, and then as luck would have it, when I was traveling to Seattle a couple of weeks ago, I dropped by a bookstore there, and it was just this beautiful, beautiful color was just staring right at me from the bookshelves. I approached it, saw that it was a used book in good condition, that it was incredibly cheap given the price online, and decided that it didn't matter to me that it was just this heavy tome. I was going to take it with me, even though I had no room in my carry-on. No matter. It came with me back home, and I am so incredibly glad that it did, because this book contains his collected fictions. It's interesting because I had no idea how I was or why I was diving into this book at this particular time in my life, but I just decided to go with it, and my goodness, it is so good. A super quick backdrop. Borges was born in Argentina in 1899. He is said to have admired his mom's revolutionary family roots, but he took after his bookworm father's side, and from a very young age translated certain works into Spanish and heavily marveled at and explored the collection of books in his family's library from a young age. I always thought it was Gabriel Garcia Marquez who pioneered Lo Real Maravilloso, which is magical realism, which is a literary style of writing that incorporates magic and the phenomena that accompany it in a way, in a context that's otherwise very mundane and very realistic. So it's that juxtaposition in that type of writing that sort of just makes the words jump off the page in a sense when you're reading. But it turns out I was watching an interview, or perhaps reading an article talking about Borges. Turns out he also incorporated magical realism, or perhaps even pioneered it. I'm not sure of the details, but the other day on YouTube, I watched Borges being interviewed, and it was at a point in his life when he had already gone blind. He talked about going blind in his 50s in the interview, and how he had friends who would read to him and sustain his bookwormish, avid reading ways even after going blind. There was a particular bit in the interview that caught my attention. He talked about going down the street, and he said, quote, "Sometimes walking down the street, I feel unaccountably happy, and I welcome that happiness. I don't know where it comes from, but still it should be welcomed." And I think that might just be the approach one should take when reading Borges and some of his writing, because you honestly don't know where any of this comes from, because he uses such vivid language and so many different references and allusions to things from history or from other literary genres might not be familiar with. So you're often left perplexed and questioning what on earth it is that you're reading in those sentences. But as you progress, you realize, my goodness, this is fun, and I'm going to welcome it and see what comes of it. So I had a lot of fun reading the Aleph. My first encounter was with that literary work of his, and with each sentence in that short story, I believe it's only about 10-11 pages, he writes in a way where, again, you're left thinking, what just happened? What is going on in here? And then you start realizing the way he writes is very as a matter of fact. And what I liked about it in particular was that it had no sense of moral judgment attached to any of the actions that the characters took. There was no narrator who was trying to guide you one way or another in terms of how you should be feeling in that moment reading that sentence. And it was a fun experience. It was detached of morality. It was detached of judgment. It was simply characters, quite mundane, possibly thrust against the backdrop of quite weird things happening, and you're just left saying, okay, let's roll with it. In this particular short story, Borges sets the main character. It's a fictionalized version of himself. He sets the character at a point in time in which he mourns the loss of his beloved Beatriz Viterbo. And after her passing, he begins to make it a habit to visit her family home on the anniversary of her death. And over time, he becomes acquainted with, I believe it was her cousin, Carlos Danetti. And this Carlos figure is a mediocre writer. He is delusionally narcissistic with regard to his own grandeur and significance in the grand scheme of things. Borges casts him off as insane, but one day Danetti calls up Borges, and they have a conversation over the phone. Daneri is very upset because his home is about to be torn down, and he tells Borges that there's no way he could lose his home. He hasn't finished writing his masterpiece poem that he wanted to, and he can't do so now if they tear down the home, because the basement of that house of his contains what is known as the Aleph. The Aleph, as it is described, is, quote, one of the points in space that contain all points. And so, again, I read that and thought, okay, but this is veering towards the world of fantasy, and I don't particularly like that genre, but you roll with it. And there's a comedic element to the story as well, because here we have Daneri who's about to take Borges down a dark basement. Before doing so, he gives him some sort of drink, and there's a funny sequence where Borges recounts, I followed his ridiculous instructions. He finally left. He carefully let down the trapdoor. In spite of a chink of light that I began to make out later, the darkness seemed total. Suddenly, I realized the danger I was in. I had allowed myself to be locked underground by a madman, after first drinking down a snifter of poison. Carlos's boasting clearly masked the deep-seated fear that I wouldn't see his, quote, miracle. In order to protect his delirium, in order to hide his madness from himself, he had to kill me. I felt a vague discomfort, which I tried to attribute to my rigidity, not to the operation of a narcotic. I closed my eyes, then opened them. And then it's in the simplicity of this sentence that it just grabbed me. He wrote, it was then that I saw the Aleph. Oof, and then the level of detail that Borges goes into as he describes snippets of his memories from, quote, every letter of every page at once. As a boy, I would be astounded that the letters in a closed book didn't get all scrambled up together overnight. Saw simultaneous, night and day, a sunset in Gerataro that seemed to reflect the color of a rose in Bengal. Saw my bedroom with no one in it. Saw in a study a globe of the terraqueous world placed between two mirrors that multiplied it endlessly. Saw horses with wind-whipped manes on a beach in the Caspian Sea at dawn. The delicate bones of a hand. The survivors of a battle sending postcards. Saw a tarot card in a shop window in Mirzapur. Saw the oblique shadows of ferns on the floors of a greenhouse. Tigers, pistons, bisons, tides, and armies. Saw all the ants on earth. A Persian astrolabe. Saw in a desk drawer obscene, incredible, detailed letters that Beatriz had sent Carlos Argentino. Saw the circulation of my dark blood. Saw the coils and springs of love and the alterations of death. Saw that left from everywhere at once. And on and on and on, and he feels dizzy and confused and has no idea what is going on. And then all of a sudden, after the whole thing, he decides, out of a weird, perhaps even immature sense of contempt for Carlos, and Carlos being correct that there in fact does exist an Aleph, he decides to play a weird trick on Carlos and sort of cast him off as insane, confirm to him he is insane, make Carlos think that indeed it's perhaps his insanity that has led him to believe that there is an Aleph in the basement. So he decides to sort of just cast it off as, you know what, Carlos, you should be going out of the city and sort of getting some fresh air and clearing your mind a bit. So again, no moral judgment. It's Borges' beautiful way of depicting in vivid detail certain sequences of a very weird nature, and you're just left thinking, wow, okay. And you are just there to take it for what it is and then to make of it whatever you'd like. My take on it, towards the end, he talks about how the vivid details of the Aleph, he can't necessarily describe them perfectly. Language doesn't sort of contain the ability for him to do so, and he attributes part of it also to the fading of his memory with regard to the Aleph and what he saw in it. And he ties that back into the fading of his memory with regard to Beatriz, his lover. And in those moments, you realize, my goodness, a grand thing such as memory, even that in a way is elusive. So I am so eager to continue this adventure of mine and read some other works, some other short stories in this beautiful book. If you have any recommendations, please, please, please just add them to the comment section down below. I will 100% be going back to this and perhaps doing another video of some of his other works, because my goodness, a measly video such as this right now does not do it justice. If you do have time, go ahead and pick this up. They're short stories, which is a good thing, because if you're short on time, you can quickly just, grab this book and let it consume a part of your day. I assure you, you will continue to mull it over as the day progresses. It's a good sign indicating that you've been in the presence of a great writer. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this weirdly short video. I just had to hop on and gush over Borges. And so I will see you next time. And please, if time and disposition allow, go ahead and like this video and leave a comment. I read and respond to all of them. And talk to you soon. Bye.